biasanya lebih banyak di smoking area.
Good morning, everybody. Just invite the last few to take their seats. Thank you very much. A very good morning to everybody. One or two people have said, gosh, this is a really, really early start for something that is of so much consequence, so serious. But we know that your brains are at their most agile. You come straight from the gym, from whatever your fitness hop is, cycling over here, whatever it might be. So we've opted for this time of day because we know that at this time of day, there are no interruptions to disturb your intention to be here with us. BritCham at this, the 9th BritCham International Business Confidence Index 2024. This Business Confidence Index 2024 resumes after a fairly long pause. The last time was in November 2020. That was quite deliberate. The reasons being, as you can imagine, an index after 8 years, trends have been established, and those trends are of great value in determining how a nation and the different moving parts of being attractive as a business destination can move. So we didn't want to be distorted by too much relating to COVID. We're delighted that we recommence now. This is the 75th anniversary of the UK and Indonesia having established a trade and investment relationship, and this is not necessarily directly a specific part of the events during this year, events that will continue to celebrate bilaterally that particular 75th anniversary. But it is one of a number of events of great significance in our calendar as BritCham. Just a few welcomes. I have great pleasure in welcoming Pat from BKPM, joined by Ibu Sri Endang and Narita Sari. Welcome to you both. Pat is very, very graciously agreed to step in for Pat Nurul Ikhwan, well known to us, but he has been called to Bali with his minister and boss, Pat Bahlil, and as much as he rates himself as being able to be multitasking and be in different places at different times, he couldn't be in Bali and Jakarta. So his apologies to everybody here at BritCham. We also welcome His Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Asia Pacific, Martin Kent, who will say a few words of welcome to everybody very soon. I think I'm correct in saying, Martin, this is your first formal visit to Indonesia? In this job, yeah. Welcome. We also welcome friends and colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Great relationships have been established between BritCham and that particular ministry during the course of the B20 and also the APIF, which we very, very successfully collaborated and supported over the success of. We also welcome members from the Jakarta Investment Centre as well, an organisation also very much promoting investment opportunities to British businesses, and I know are looking at partnering with us on our roadshow, which Martin may make reference to. If he doesn't, I will a little bit later. Asia Pacific Roadshow going across the length and breadth of the United Kingdom, talking about the opportunities regionally, in our case, obviously, talking about the opportunities of Indonesia. To our members of the board, thank you very, very much. A really good showing. Appreciate you coming along. Our consultative board as well, and the chairs and committee members of our different hubs. To our guests, to our colleagues that stay engaged with BritCham, a very, very warm welcome to you all. and we're delighted that you are here for one of our 60-something events planned for 2024. First of all, it gives me great pleasure to make a few acknowledgements and thanks to our partners for this International Business Confidence Index 2024, not least at all because the integrity of this entire piece of work is down to the collaboration with Nielsen. So I think this is the 5th time that we have worked together with Nielsen, and really appreciate their team coming on board with us and helping us get this back on track after the 3.5 year or so lull. Thank you to Nielsen. To our other partners, BP Indonesia, the British School Jakarta, Bumi Laut Group, CastleAsia, Inke Maris and Associates, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, ICAEW, the London School of Public Relations, LSPR, Noble Solutions, another partner of BritCham's on our last roadshow in October and November, and the Oval Partnership as well. To each of you, thank you very, very much for supporting this event and helping us make this event accessible in terms of scale and the type of venue for our members and guests. In terms of context, the Business Confidence Index is not a deep dive into specific regulations, specific laws, specific aspects about doing business. It is designed to give an overall feel for the environment and the climate that prevails in Indonesia with regard to doing business in Indonesia. It is a survey of businesses, international businesses, that are domiciled and invested here in Indonesia. So the businesses with the direct experience of actually navigating the different challenges, recognizing the potential and seizing the opportunities as well. So this is a piece of work whose output is there to inform for the purpose of public relations for Indonesia, inform for the purpose of advocacy, inform to drive the pillars that have been established through our hubs, 7 hubs that we have. So for those that have some sort of misperception that we're going to be having a close look at specific regulations, I'd just like to calibrate or get your expectations properly calibrated in that regard. Our format for today will be some welcome remarks from Martin. We will move to Ian Betts, who will actually present the findings and outputs of this particular Business Confidence Index. We will then get a response from Pat Riacno from BKPM, and then Pat Donny, who has just arrived from Washington, D.C. Did you have any problems at immigration?
Not at all.
No. Just arrived. Will also join Martin and Ian to take some Q&A from the floor, and it would be my pleasure to moderate throughout. But first of all, just a very, very brief introduction to Martin. As mentioned, His Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Asia Pacific. Martin is relatively new to this role, I believe September last year, but not new to leadership within various units of trade, business development and investment, and those roles have included being Director of DBT and also as Deputy Trade Commissioner for Africa. Martin also has vast experience of the private sector, having started his career with Boston Consulting and also worked with multinationals which have included in Australia and in Singapore. He's therefore very well placed to appreciate the outputs from the private sector as it relates to this International Business Confidence Index 2024. As mentioned, Martin has been in the roles just since September. He's engaged 3 times, I think I'm correct, with the wider BSEA group, Britain in Southeast Asia, which is the informal grouping of the different chambers or business groups, associations of the British kind throughout the 10 countries of Southeast Asia, and we all have a very, very positive feel about the way that he plans to engage with us for the benefit of British business, British interests, British progress in this region, and in particular in the 75th year, as mentioned, of trade and investment relationship with Indonesia. Martin.
Selamat pagi, good morning, and it's a real pleasure to be here this morning. As Chris said, I'm Martin Inke, His Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Asia Pacific, and I'm incredibly grateful to the British Chamber for inviting me here this morning and for running this event. In particular, thanks to Pat Donny and Chris Wren for your leadership of this. As Chris mentioned, my background is in the private sector at the Boston Consulting Group, so for those of you in the private sector, I've come from your world. I know there's nothing more scary than when people say, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you. So I've been in your world, and I know just how important this kind of data and analysis is to your business development, to your scenario planning, and to your considerations of Indonesia. That's why events like this really matter. And 6 months into this role, it's really clear to me just how focused the UK government is about its Indo-Pacific tilt. There's no doubt in any of the data that we look at that the £124 billion relationship, trade relationship between the UK and the Indo-Pacific is only going to grow. And with over 50% of the world's growing middle class, with a whole plethora of FTAs, economic partnership agreements, digital economy agreements springing up across the whole area, our focus on this is getting greater and greater, and the statistics tell us that we need to focus even more. And I'm incredibly grateful for all the work the British Chambers are doing across the region. I see the British Chambers as friends of all parts of British business and British government, and an extension of our work and an extension of your work as the business community. Frankly, there's more work to be done than we could all do if everyone had each other's resource. So that whole ecosystem of support is so important to me. And over the next 4 years in this role, I hope that you'll see UK government working ever more closely with the Chambers network, doing more things together, providing greater insight, being more competitive with our economic adversaries, and driving our trade agenda to new heights. Across the region, there's a number of consistent priorities. We often call them the 3 Ds: digital, decarbonisation and defence, underpinned by our thriving financial and professional services ecosystem. And I think those 3 priorities, alongside the financial and professional services ecosystem, are areas where the UK and Indonesia can work ever more closely together and really step change our trading relationship as we look across the wealth of opportunities that are coming up, the strength of the relationship, and the trajectory of those trends that we're seeing. So, the UK and Indonesia's trading relationship at the moment is 3.4 billion annually. Exports from the UK to Indonesia represent 1.6 billion of that 3.4 billion. And UK imports from Indonesia are currently at 1.8 billion. Whilst Indonesia was the UK's 55th largest trading partner in 23, the UK is Indonesia's 37th largest trading partner. Now that's quite far away from where the trading relationship of the world's 6th and 16th largest economies should be. And I think that's the challenge and that's the opportunity ahead. And the statistics around Indonesia remain really compelling. And that's why we're seeing so much increase in political focus, in focus from all elements of the British civil service, the British diplomatic service, and our friends and partners across the Indonesian government with whom we have such a positive relationship. I've had a sneak peek at some of the results of this, the Business Confidence Index, and actually it's really promising. So we come into this morning on a positive note, with a positive outlook, with enormous amounts of opportunities. We will see, and I hope I'm not giving away too much, we'll save a few nuggets in there, that business leaders anticipate a vibrant business environment in the next year, with good workforce and investment support. And as you'll see, they're some of the most positive outlooks in terms of data for the last 10 years. 52% of businesses polled are considering additional investments in the coming years, and the business outlook in Indonesia is gaining confidence after the pandemic and is currently even better than 2016 to 2019. But we know that there are still challenges remaining, and that's why our partnership and collaboration to overcome those challenges is even more important than ever, given the size of the opportunity. Corruption remains a challenge. 71% noted corruption as a key barrier. Bureaucratic inefficiency was one of the biggest challenges affecting businesses, with 70% of respondents noting that bureaucratic inefficiency was a key barrier. So, to conclude, it's so important that government, the chamber, business all work together in this endeavour. I'm absolutely committed to driving this forward, and I'm delighted to say also that my new deputy, Rhiannon Harries, who's our Deputy Trade Commissioner for Southeast Asia, will join me over the coming years in being a regular visitor to this market. We are public servants at the end of the day. We are here to serve you as the British business community, to try and drive economic growth in the UK, and our geostrategic partnership with Indonesia as a friend and an ally, and someone we're looking to work together increasingly with over the coming years. So we have a very dedicated and enthusiastic team in the British Embassy here in Jakarta, led by Sophie, who is down here, who I'm sure many of you will know already. So we have a team that's engaged, that's enthused, that's willing to work with you and take this relationship to new heights. We have a chamber that's engaged, is dynamic, and is doing this kind of work. And as I look across the chamber network across the whole region, I see it becoming ever more modern, ever more business focused, and the kind of dynamic, energetic chambers that the British business community of today need. So it's a great pleasure to be here. I really look forward to meeting all of you at the networking after this and around on this visit and future visits. And I'm delighted now to let's get into the meat of the data. So I'll hand back to Chris. Thank you so much.
Well, that will teach me. I should have mentioned the embargo, shouldn't I? Embargo till 9:15 on there. No problem, Martin. They were just a few highlights. And thank you very, very much for outlining the importance of the relationship of the UK with the region. The region being a significant priority, the 3 Ds, as mentioned, and also trying to perhaps resize to the correct size 2 countries whose trade should be considerably more than it currently is, and that's what we're all working together to achieve. So now to the BritCham International Business Confidence Index 2024 in partnership with Nielsen. It gives me great pleasure to invite Ian Betts to come and present the key findings to you. Ian is Honorary Secretary of BritCham Indonesia. He also acts as board oversight for our advocacy committee and our technology and digitalization hub. He's the managing partner of CastleAsia, which is possibly Indonesia's longest established advisory group, relied on for its very, very insightful analysis of politics, of risk, and the general business climate of Indonesia. It's with great thanks and pleasure that I invite Ian to take the floor and present this 2024 International Business Confidence Index.
Thank you very much, Chris, and everyone at the Chamber for setting this up. Also to Martin Kent, Trade Commissioner, welcome. Also Rhiannon and everyone else supporting your team here. We're very pleased to have you here and for highlighting the key focal points of the British government vis-à-vis Indonesia and the broader Southeast Asia region now. Particularly, we focus today on Indonesia, and as you've mentioned, there is a great deal of positivity in the perception and outlook that we'll see represented in the data. So let's move forward and look at the data. of this Business Confidence Index in association with Nielsen ICAEW. So those of you who are members who have had access to the survey will note that it was conducted during the month of March, from the 7th of March through the 3rd of April. This was a self-completion online survey, and we had a total of 90 respondents. So that's our pool, and it's from there that we extract all of the data and the results of the survey today. The key business sectors that are represented, you see them there on the screen. Services was the highest, single at 26%, but we also have energy and natural resources, infrastructure and corruption and construction, education, manufacturing, food and beverage, agriculture, fisheries and forestry, consultancy, hospitality, travel and tourism. All of these were represented in the survey pool, and those sectors and business areas will serve to inform the results of the survey that we'll see in the slides. Now, as Chris mentioned, we are now taking this data from 2024. It's a significant gap from 2020. Much of the data will reflect back on and give comparative data points from 2019 and 2020. So we'll be able to really assess the difference in outlook, the growth in positivity, and also highlight the key concerns and factors that businesses are looking at post-COVID. I should also mention that a lot of that positivity is driven by the post-G20 environment from 2022, and also a very successful ASEAN summit hosted by Indonesia last year. So very much a solid and positive base to go on to help to inform and drive the data of this pool of respondents from the chamber. Let's have a look in a bit more detail at the outlook from that pool of respondents towards the business environment. Overall, as Martin's indicated in his initial comments, the results are extraordinarily positive. When asked how would you describe your outlook towards business over the next 12 months, an overwhelming 66% of those respondents were positive. And look at the difference from 2020. It's 35% up on 2020 at the height of COVID. Since then, we've had the period of post-COVID recovery and those significant international business events that have driven Indonesia to a higher place in the perception for investment and business entry. Even the neutral group, it's a 7% decline, as many of that group who were initially neutral 4 years ago have moved into that positive space, and the negatives have declined enormously. 29%, only 9% of the respondents were negative about the overall business outlook for the country in the next 12 months. So that's our baseline. Let's examine what that really says in terms of the individual business factors and what's driving this. So here we can see that business in Indonesia has been gaining in confidence after the pandemic, and it's even better now than it was from between 2016 and 2019. Martin's alluded, if we look at 2014-15, were 71% positive, and we are now in 2024 at the highest point since that of 66%. Now, if you look at the data points from 2018, 2019, we start to see the drop-off as we move towards COVID of 2019 and 2020. Significant decline there, as you would expect, to 31%. But a terrific climb back now, post-COVID, and after those very significant international business events, driving confidence and the positive outlook squarely up in terms of Indonesia. So very positive outlook for Indonesia as reflected by the response to the survey. A number of key sectors are really reflecting the best of that growth and that positivity. Respondents were asked, how would you describe your outlook for the following business sectors in Indonesia over the next 12 months? And which of these following business sectors, those reflected here, do you think have the opportunity to grow in Indonesia over the next 12 months? And these are the results. As you'd expect, with COVID-19 decimating business and industry around the world, but particularly in Southeast Asia, which is reliant so much on hospitality, travel, tourism, food and beverage. These were enormously hit hard during COVID, but the bounce back, the rebound has been terrific. Now we see a 63% increase on the data from 2020 for hospitality, travel and tourism. No surprises there that we're seeing this rebound in travel, hospitality and tourism as tourists and travelers return to the countries they want to experience and travel in, engage and enjoy tourism in post-COVID. It's a good story too in food and beverage, 20% increase on 2020. The interesting one to note is the one flagged in red, and that's e-commerce. You would expect to see a growing trend for e-commerce around the world, as we're seeing in many, many other countries. But here we see from 2020, in fact, a decline of over 20% from 2020 to 2024. So we may have an opportunity to dig into that a little bit deeper. It may be the regulatory environment that's driving that. There may be other factors that are behind this decline in e-commerce. But certainly these sectors are seeing growth. Infrastructure construction will be a consistently high and positive story as we go through these slides, and the same is true of energy and natural resources, both seeing increases of more than 30% on the positivity reflected from 2020. So enormously positive outlooks for those sectors as reflected by respondents to the survey. And of course we are seeing high optimism for increases in key business data. So over the next 12 months, respondents were asked, what actions will your business take in the following areas? Businesses have responded as follows, and again, it's a remarkably positive picture. If you look at revenue, businesses are seeing 35% increase on their revenues from 2020. It's 79% up. And that's a 19% increase on the data seen in 2019, the last normal year, shall we say, before the massive impact of COVID-19. Profits is a similar story, up 37% on the data from 2020, it's 76%. And again, that's in excess of a 30% increase on the data from 2019 prior to COVID. The workforce is a similarly important element of anyone doing business in Indonesia, particularly British business. And British businesses in Indonesia generate more than 3 million jobs in the country, and I think that's something we need to recognise as British businesses, as representatives of the British government and as the Chamber here. That's an enormous number and it's growing. Here we see a 40% increase in that from 2020 and 18% on 2019 prior to COVID. So a great deal of positivity there. And perhaps most significantly, investment. Investment is remarkably positive. It's up. It's up 20% on 2020. It's up 7% on 2019. But I think we can all be pleased that it's 47%, and that's a very good number comparatively for ASEAN, and it's a very good result for Pat Riakno and BKPM and all the businesses coming to you to do business here in Indonesia. I would also say that when we are driving the workforce and those 3 million plus jobs that Britain generates in Indonesia, much of that work is down to education, skilling up the workforce and making workers ready for the new industries that are fueling this drive in investment. And one key factor there is education, and the British Chamber with its education centre and some 16 or 17 universities represented here are doing terrific work in driving the generation of those jobs forward. Along with the hub, we have representatives for the hub for human resources here today. So excellent work being done by all concerned. Very positive story there. And the positivity of that story is represented not just in Jakarta and the traditional heartlands of investment in Indonesia, in West Java and East Java, But as you can see here, it's represented across the country. Respondents to the survey were asked, have you expanded to other provinces, cities or regions within Indonesia in the last 12 months? And many have. And you'll see here, Sumatra, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, enormous percentage increases in the presence and expansions of businesses there. Even Papua is up from 5% in 2020 to almost 30% in 2024. We're seeing significant rises in Kalimantan and Sulawesi too, as the special economic zones, as interest in the new industries that are driving the EV ecosystem for batteries, for green industries, for decarbonisation, and some of these other key business topics are now distributing their investment, their capital, their interest and their jobs across the country much more squarely. Massive focus on Kalimantan, no surprises there. We have the ICAEW, Nusantara, the new capital city, due to open. We have all of the governments driving towards Indonesia's golden year of 2045, and the focal point of that in terms of workforce investment and bringing Indonesia to the top 5 economic powerhouses of the world. And we're starting to see now across Indonesia a great deal of levelling as investment and business is finding these provinces and regions. So great news for Kalimantan, Sulawesi. West Java, East Java are still there. Those industrial states are still very active, dynamic and providing excellent service and will continue to do so. But the distribution is now spread much more evenly across the more far-flung regions. Much more so than ever they were before, as reflected in this comparative data. We also took a data point asking the respondents whether they were considering expansion to those provinces, cities and regions within the next 12 months. And if yes, which regions would they be going to? And again, it's a positive story for Sumatra. It's a positive story too for the traditional heartlands of West Java and East Java, where we see increases even on last year. Bali is still up. Perhaps some of that investment is due to tourism and other investments there. Kalimantan and Sulawesi taking a slight dip compared to the expansions they saw last year. Perhaps that may be due to the fluctuations we're seeing in the regulatory environment for nickel, the price fluctuations we're seeing in minerals, impacts of the government's downstreaming industrial policy, and other elements that may be putting some of those investments on hold for this year in Kalimantan and Sulawesi. But they are on the map and they are seeding and seeing significant investments there in a way we never saw before. 21% considering expanding their business within the next 12 months. And I should have highlighted in the last slide, if we just go back very quickly, 34% expanded their business to these regions in the last 12 months. So overall, it's a very positive story for Indonesia's decentralization and for workforces, businesses, service providers and vendors across all of these provinces of Indonesia. As we work and build business and invest in those regions, it's essential that business and investment work with regional governments and local officials. Our respondents were asked whether they've engaged with local government and how would they describe that engagement. We can see some very interesting and largely positive results stemming from that here. When we talk about continuity and experience of engagement with local government officials in terms of business and investment, 37% of the respondents were positive. That's a 10% increase on 2020. That tells a good story about engagement, communication, interaction and interface between business, investment and government officials. The group that are neutral, there's been a small decline there. I'm imagining that's being pushed up into the positive space. There is a degree of negativity. We do have to note that's up from 7% from the 11% that it was in 2020. If you do your maths, and I'm sure some of you are, you'll note that this adds up to 88%. The additional 12% were those who had not engaged with local government officials, and therefore they don't tally in these results. But I think we should focus on the positive there, while noting that significant challenges, as Chris remarked, do remain, and as Martin mentioned too, the regulatory environment, corruption, bureaucratic inefficiency and red tape. All of these factors are those which are likely to be driving that 11% negativity. And we will dig a little bit deeper into those in the coming slides. But overall, a very positive experience of working with government officials. I'm sure Pak Priatno, Ibu Sri Endang, that's good news story for you from BKPM. Let's take a deeper dive at some of those factors that are affecting Indonesia's business outlook and some of those issues that play into that positivity and perhaps even some of those negative factors. Certainly we've seen measuring these factors, we've seen a more positive outlook on macroeconomic factors, such as represented here: investment climate, political environment, labour policy. Those three factors are those which have seen the highest growth. So the investment climate has seen an increase of 59% positivity. 41% for the political environment, which is quite remarkable given the fact that we've just been through an election, and it was an election which was disputed. The pool of respondents to the survey were responding to questions after the election, but prior to the Constitutional Court ruling, as it did yesterday, on the final outcome of that election. So respondents to the survey were taking a chance on their perceptions to Indonesia based on the political environment they were seeing and forecasting. And overall, that's 41%, that is high. Labour policy has been another reasonably positive outlook here, at 26%. There's been an increasingly positive outlook towards labour, reflected in relations between corporations and labour unions, but also in terms of policy, skilling up, access to workforce and labourers, etc. Areas where we saw less positive growth: fiscal policy, an area of key growth. We have excellent fiscal prudent management in Indonesia by the Ministry of Finance under Sri Mulyani, but it is a point that's seen less of that positivity. And again, regulatory, legal environment, no surprises here. Anyone who's in business here or reading reports from the recent weeks and months will have seen a great deal of material on some of those highly disputed points of regulation, such as MOT Regulation 36 of 2023, restrictions on imports, local content regulations, and etc. No surprises, Pak Priatno, BKPM, we are seeing these, whatever the positivity, these are still reflected as some of the key areas of concern for foreign investment. But seeing, comparatively speaking, the story again is a remarkably positive one for Indonesia in 2024 compared with 2020 or 2019. So positive macroeconomic factors predicted by businesses, those who responded to the survey during the course of it earlier this year. For some points, however, and this is interesting to note, if we drill down a little bit into this data, bureaucratic inefficiency and red tape, for example, this is one area that respondents reported a decline, flagged in red there. So good news for those who are engaging with government. You reported there'd been a decline in bureaucratic inefficiency and red tape. Respondents were asked to what extent would these challenges represented on this slide affect Indonesia over the next 12 months. Corruption remains a key factor there. It's up at 71% here, so a very small increase on the data from 2019 and 2020, and it is a key factor for businesses here. Corruption is prevalent. It's very much in the media and in the public domain. It's pervasive, and the KPK and other agencies that are tasked with addressing it are struggling to do so for various reasons. And certainly it's an obstacle for foreign investment in Indonesia. The regulatory environment, probably focusing on some of the contested and disputed, some of the more controversial nationalistic policies that we've seen reflecting the decline in regulatory environment positivity there. So some focus there would be very much favoured by the business community. Lack of skilled labour, well, that's been addressed a little. We are starting to see some positivity in access to skilled labour there as businesses start to acquire and access that skilled labour. Labour policy constant at 64, the same as it was in 2019, so fairly neutral there. But businesses are engaging and unions are engaging. The relationship is a more mature one now. So overall, it's a positive story, and certainly that decline in bureaucratic inefficiency is welcome. Nonetheless, it remains a challenge to business, as does the lack of skilled labour. When asked to what extent would the following changes affect your business over the next 12 months, we did see an increase on this question to 51% of respondents who were seeking to add skilled labour and concerned about the lack of it. Regulatory environment here at 56%, bureaucratic inefficiency at 58%. So overall, position is rather neutral, but positive on a number of these key points. So I think we can take away that there's been some progress in labour, progress in bureaucratic efficiency, and more work and attention to do on some of the other key factors there. If we look at talent and the active engagement and involvement of businesses and investors with trade unions, that's been a more positive story. Our respondents were asked, how would you describe your outlook for these 4 key labour issues over the next 12 months? Active engagement with trade unions came out very positive compared to earlier data from 2019. So up from 12% to a very positive 28%. Also, honesty and integrity of labour, up from 18% to 28%. Increase in the cost of skilled labour there, well, that's increased again to 32%. But it's the availability of talent that looks quite interesting there, perhaps reflected by an attention on the new industries, education, and availability of new talent here, 49%, significantly up on 33 from 2019 and 35% on 2018. So good news stories largely for labour. A lot of positives to draw from British businesses working in Indonesia, investing in Indonesia, and Indonesian businesses working with British partners. Overall, there is some positivity to draw from these results. Now, it's clear for us in Indonesia, in the region and around the world, that we are now moving out of the period of response and recovery from COVID-19. Let's drill down a little bit into what that recovery means and what the perceptions are for business in Indonesia as a result of that. Respondents were asked, to what extent has COVID-19 influenced the actions that your business will take over the next 12 months? Well, we look back first in terms of investment. At that point, this would have been at 56% in 2020. It's now down to 28%. It's a 28% drop in terms of the impact of COVID-19 on investment. So that demonstrates that while the impacts of COVID remain, and they're not quite finished, we are still seeing an incredible recovery in Indonesia from COVID-19. Similar story for the workforce. This would have been over 50% impact from COVID-19 in 2020. We are now seeing that down to 21%. So the recovery is well underway. We have not reached the peaks that we saw in some of the data of 2014, but we have made significant headway here, and the story is overwhelmingly positive. So much so that when we asked respondents whether you as a company were considering any additional investments in Indonesia over the next 2 years, 52%, which is an increase of 7%, say they would be. So over 4 years, we've seen a 7% increase. More than 50% are interested in making additional investment in Indonesia over the next 12 months. And there's also been a decline in the number of neutral responses from 31 to 29%, and also a decline in the negatives there. From over 20% to 19%. So overwhelmingly positive here. It's a very good news story for BKPM and for all the investment agencies and those related to business and investment in Indonesia. Overall, a very strong story for Britain here. But what are the factors that those businesses, as they drive their new investments, will be facing as they move forward with them? Well, we asked the respondents to the survey, what key strategies did you develop for your company during the pandemic in order to withstand and respond to it? And we had everything from accelerated digital adoption, lowering operational costs, focusing on specific consumer segments, increased investment in technology and data, developing an enhanced value proposition for consumers, and reducing the numbers of permanent employees. The highest uptake we saw was in acceleration of digital adoption, as both the private sector and the public sector, I would say, took on digital tools and technologies to respond to their consumer and customer bases. 59%, in fact, adopting digital technologies and services in order to respond during the period of the pandemic. 56% reducing their overall operating costs. But these are strategies which they've then gone on to build and use in strengthening themselves for what might be a coming or next pandemic. But we are seeing here a great deal of uptake by businesses in these key areas of strategic addressing the crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic here, with accelerated digital adoption and lowering operational costs coming out at the highest. And in response to and in preparation for withstanding a possible second pandemic, our respondents were asked, how are you preparing your company in the event of another pandemic? 79% said that they were developing an agile operating model in order to respond to that crisis. 41% would lower their operating costs. 34% had accelerated their end-to-end value chain digitalization. 33% implementing revenue forecasting with higher frequency. We saw that across the board. 18% would reduce the number of permanent employees, and another 80% would reduce their bulk stocks there. So companies making themselves ready for crisis, lean, agile, flexible, and responding to business impacts in a way that would leave them much stronger in the event of another pandemic there. As we look towards this data, our respondents were asked how they saw these elements of the economy, particularly infrastructure, and the positivity in that sector here. The Indonesian presidential has been won outright, and there is now certainty, the question said, about who will be the president in October during the inauguration. How do you perceive the impacts on this key area of infrastructure? 60% were overwhelmingly positive. Very small numbers were negative, particularly if we look at infrastructure. For direct foreign investment, it was 56%, remarkably high, with only a 10% negative impact following the presidential election. In terms of Indonesia's place and international perceptions as a G20 global influencer, Indonesia's benefited greatly from October 2022. 52% were positive about that, with only 11% negative. 51% for political stability, and again, that's remarkable following the course of this election. And again, 19% negative, perhaps reflecting the nervousness that respondents were seeing as we move towards the closure of the dispute that we saw come to a head yesterday with the Constitutional Court ruling on the results of the election. Perhaps taken now, that negativity would decline even more. And then inclusivity and engagement with foreign investment, 48%. Bit of negativity there, 17%, but perhaps no surprise given some of the factors we very clearly enunciated earlier during these slides. Let's take a little look at government policy and try and understand how that has been responding to this positivity and what the key factors are there. Our respondents were asked how they would describe their view on the government's attitude towards business and business regulation in Indonesia over the next 12 months. 58% were positive about improvements in consultation with business. That's 6% up on 2020, 1% down on 2019, but significantly up on 2020, which is remarkable. 54% believe that pro-business decisions would improve. That's an increase of 6% on 2020. It's a decline on 2019, but it's 14% down. But nonetheless, it's still a very strong story. 41% improvement for coordination with other ministries, which is a good story. That's up 1% on 2020. 33% here for effective implementation of policies. That's up 5% on the last data, which was 2020, which is significant for the last 4 years. And then an increase of 2% to 29% for clear and concise explanations provided by government. So overall, in terms of attitude towards government, it's positive, and businesses are reflecting that in these responses. Overall, the experience is turning out to be a good one. And while we may not be at the point we were in 2019 for some of these factors, we have improved on the data from 2020. Moving towards digital transformation, which is a key area of positivity between business in Indonesia. No surprises here that positive influences such as ease of communication with stakeholders, quick access to unlimited information come out the highest in terms of positive factors in digital transformation. 79% and 74% respectively. You can see in the chart on the left, the green line, 81% there of positive outlook in terms of digital transformation. Only 17% neutral, 2% negative. Overall, the digital transformation is embedded in the business psyche in Indonesia now, incontrovertibly, and is now a major element and plank of investment here. And digital transformation has been a major part of the recovery that Indonesia has seen post-COVID. 59% of businesses have in fact added digital options to their product and service lines. 16% of companies responded positively when asked whether their company was currently or expanding into new digital industries and services, and whether they were considering expanding into them in the next 12 months. 30% might be, 54% would not be, but if we look at maybe and positive yes, we're already at 46%. So overall, it's a very positive climate for the driving of digital services. And in summary, as we move towards the close, business outlook is remarkably positive. It is a vibrant business environment, as Martin noted in his comments earlier, and it's one of the highest points of optimism that we've seen in the last 10 years, with tourism continuing to rebound. Those sectors of food and beverage, hospitality, hotels, etc., are seeing that rebound too. East Java, West Java, continuing to see that investment, solid investment, but we're seeing that growth now distributed across the country. Kalimantan, Sumatra, Sulawesi, Papua, all of that's very good to see. Factors affecting business, the positive investment climate, political environment, labour policies, we've seen that reflected in responses to the question, but overall 52% are considering additional investment over the next 12 months. That's a remarkably positive outcome here. Of course, there is a better attitude that we've seen reflected from government by businesses, particularly in consultation with business leaders. and a better response with regard to corruption, bureaucratic red tape. The digital transformation has been remarkably positive. Everyone has used the opportunity provided by the crisis of COVID-19 to digitalize, bring on digital products and services, diversify their customer outreach, etc., and to bring the digital platform fully on board to their businesses. 59% have in fact added those digital options to their operations. The Chambers of Commerce and British Chamber of Commerce is among them, of course, remains a key pillar of support in the outlook and perception for business in Indonesia. How would you evaluate the work of the Chambers of Commerce? Our respondents were asked overwhelmingly positive here. Every year has been in the 60%, some neutrals at 30% going through, overwhelmingly positive, and we don't expect to see any change in that going forward. Coming towards the close now, we must recognise that infrastructure is among those sectors where we've seen the greatest progress over the past 2 years. Our respondents were asked to what extent has Indonesia made progress in these 6 areas: better infrastructure, tackling terrorism, political and social stability, all positive, with infrastructure seeing the greatest positivity. Bureaucratic efficiency, again, we have concerns there. More skilled labour, again, some progress, but still some work to do. And the regulatory environment trailing there a little. But certainly it's very good to see the better infrastructure, political and social stability reflected there positively there in terms of data from previous years. In terms of that infrastructure, railways and air transport are among those 5 areas of infrastructure that have seen the greatest positive improvement there, the 70% and 60% respectively. Roads at 74%, it's certainly up on 2020, but it's a slight dip on the figures from 2019. We see an increase too in communications as communications become enhanced and improved. The utilities too are up, and water transport is neutral on the previous data. But certainly railways, no surprises there with the Jakarta-Bandung railway being the first. Air transport too, with the growth in airports and aviation. So positive growth and outlook for infrastructure in Indonesia. This is having a positive impact on business as reflected here. Our respondents were asked how these elements of infrastructure and service would impact our business over the next 12 months. It was overwhelmingly positive for air transport, railways, again, rose up a little on 2020, but not as high as it was in 2019. Communication leveling out at 60 there. Utilities down a little from 2019, but up on 2020. So overall, it's slightly mixed, but positive certainly for railways and air transport, as we saw on the previous slide. So a lot of support here for businesses and infrastructure. Across the region, in terms of the ASEAN economic community, what impact will that have on your business? Well, we are seeing, I highlight these 2 areas, in the enhancement of competitiveness and dynamism of ASEAN SMEs. That's seen significant growth to 49% who answered positive or very positive, and 47% for transparency for non-tariff barriers. Investment protection is flat at 33, bit of an increase in harmonisation of standards, technical regulations, and also on simplification of customs procedures. Well, that's just taken a hit in recent weeks. We've yet to see how that will pan out. But certainly in terms of these key areas, it's heartening to see this progress in ASEAN, of which Indonesia is the largest individual economy. So with that, Chris, Martin, with Patriarcho and everyone, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present these findings to you as summarily as we could. Overall, it's a remarkably positive story. We hope you find it so, and look forward to continuing to engage with you as a chamber, both for the British government and the Indonesian. So Chris, thank you very much.
There there is a huge amount of data, and I'd like to thank Ian for being incredibly concise and wonderfully articulate in the way that he has shared that data with us, and in general terms given us a wonderful feel about a forward look at doing business in Indonesia. Thank you, Ian. For those of you who would like to have a copy of the report, the BritCham's team will be going around very, very shortly with QR codes, putting them on your desk. Please just click on, and that is your personal copy of this particular report. As mentioned, Dr. Riatno is standing in for Pak Nurul Ikhwan. Dr. Riatno is the Deputy for Investment Cooperation at the Ministry of Investment, or BKPM. He has a distinguished career which has spanned 2 decades in various governmental roles. He's currently serving with BKPM and has done since 2007. He's also held key positions such as Deputy Chairman for Investment Cooperation. He's led the Legal Assistance Centre for over a decade. Prior to his tenure at the Ministry of Investment, Dr. Riatno dedicated 14 years to the Cabinet Secretariat, where he's held roles which around increasing responsibility. Notably, he's led sections that focused on legislation, economic and international law analysis. Dr. Riatno's contributions have been instrumental in shaping a number of legal frameworks and fostering investment in Indonesia, making significant strides in advancing the country's legal and investment landscape. So one might say he's in part the architect, together with other members of teams, I'm sure, the positivity that's reflected in this particular report. In asking Dr. Riatno to step forward, I would just like to say that the summary slide that said up 20% for investment in 2020, which is much higher than up 7% in 2019, probably does reflect possibly the most dynamic and successful phase of BKPM in attracting inward investment, because their realised investments are at the best levels that they have been for a long, long time. I welcome Dr. Riatno for his reaction and comment to the BritCham's International Business Conference in next week.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Pak Chris, Executive Director of BritCham's Indonesia. Pak Ian, Honorary Secretary of BritCham's Indonesia and Managing Director of CastleAsia. Pak Martin Ken, His Majesty Trade Commissioner for Asia Pacific. Pak Rino Dono Subutro, Chairman British Chamber of Commerce in Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, selamat pagi, good morning to all of us. First of all, congratulations to BritCham's Indonesia at the 9th Business Confidence Index survey in 2024 in collaboration with Nielsen. We believe that BCI surveys represent of the few of the corporate member on doing business in Indonesia. We are happy and appreciate that the findings are positive. However, we also acknowledge that some challenges and highly appreciate input from the survey. basic outlook in Indonesia in confident after pandemic, around 66% positive, or up from 21% during the pandemic. It is even higher than 60 positive before pandemic. And Indonesia become one of the top global investment destination with growing investment trend. Indonesia is the 17th position of top house economy for global FDI improved in 2022 according to the Inke. Last year, we recorded 95.9 billion US dollar of total direct investment, included financial, upstream, and gas sector, or grew at the 17.5% year on year. Our data show that the manufacturing sector contribute 52% of investment last year, with strong growth in mineral processing industry. Investment in sector triple in 4 years between 2019 2023. We also see positive trend in the logistic and telco, also chemical and pharma industry in the last 5 years. Most positive sector, business outlook and opportunity growth, according to the ICAEW survey, very much portray the trend of FDI from the UK in Indonesia. And last year's food crop plantation and also livestock contribute around 27% of FDI realization, followed by food industry at 10%. The other sector of the top 5 list, chemical and pharma industry, 9%. Construction, also hotel and restaurant, will contribute 7% each. Last year, FDI from the UK saw down at minus 38% to the 387 million US dollar, after almost double the years before, 682 million US dollar. However, in the last year figure are already 72% higher than pre-pandemic level. We also very happy that 34% company survey have expanded their business in the past year, and the highest growth is recorded outside Java, such as Kalimantan, Bali, and Papua. And this is in line with our strategy to distribute investment to the outside Java by enhancing infrastructure and offering more incentive. And this is in line with President Jokowi direction. We acknowledge that the expectation toward government attitude is slightly higher in our sector, and based on this survey, and we are more than happy to provide end-to-end services for investors in doing business in Indonesia, and to implement the job creation law, several regulations have been issued to improve legal certainty, to harmonize central regional policy, and also to simplify regulation. This includes online submission or OSS with risk-based approach for investment licensing. Indonesia offers more competitive and transparent investment incentive and facility, and for instance, the latest incentive based on Precision Deal Regulation number 79/2023 for both procedure and consumer of electric vehicle to accelerate EV ecosystem development. Then factor affecting appreciate their outlook on the macroeconomic factor. Indonesia is higher in all factors compared to the pandemic period, especially investment climate, political environment, and also labor policy will even improve compared to pre-pandemic. And based on the data in the previous political years, Indonesia investment realization keep growing despite the changing growth. This year, President Jokowi even set higher growth of investment realization at plus 17.8%. And the trend show that political years does not have significant impact on investment in Indonesia. We believe that our strong economy, fundamental and government commitment to undertake continuous structural reform will boost economic growth, and this is also supported by many factors, such as Indonesia is South Asia largest economy with steady GDP growth and stable economy. Economic growth in 2023 was recorded at the 5.05%, and it is projected to accelerate further to 5.2% in this year. Indonesia offers young and productive population and abundant natural resources. Affirmation of investment grade by three major rating agencies, Fitch, Modi, and S&P highlight Indonesia macro stability, promising growth prospect, and also confident on policy continuity. We appreciate positive assessment from the business community on Indonesia outlook and BritCham's wonderful initiative to capture investor view on doing business in Indonesia, and this year's survey provide valuable input to the government, especially Minister of Investment as the main focal point in improving investment climate and strengthening coordination. We are looking forward to deepening collaboration with BritCham's to strengthen investment relations within Indonesia and UK, also beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed to Pak Riyatno, Deputy for Investment Cooperation at the Ministry of Investment, or BKPM. For those of our members that are not familiar with the nature of the relationship between BritCham and BKPM, it's perhaps best described or encapsulated with the type of cooperation and collaboration that took place actually in the UK in October or November of last year, when we recommenced our roadshows. And those roadshows really are about going up and down the UK and doing some positive PR for Indonesia. Although Indonesia has great headline stats, it's a very, very big country, the UK still does not really know it that well or understand it that well. And we take on with BKPM the opportunity of dispelling a few myths and also talking through what the opportunities are and how they might be best taken. So it was a pleasure to be a part of the Indonesian Investment Summit. Pat Donny was a keynote speaker. I had the pleasure of moderating a session, and 2 or 3 of our members were also involved as companies, providing if you like, success stories of just what can happen if you take that brave step and engage with this wonderfully large market that is full of opportunity. We will be doing the same again in June in partnership. I alluded earlier to the June roadshow, which has been reinvigorated under Martin Kent. This will be an Asia-Pacific roadshow led by DBT, but at Martin's request, with significant participation from the different chambers of commerce and British business associations throughout the region. So we will be supporting in many of those towns and cities of the UK, and ourselves working closely with BKPM, working with Bank Indonesia, and together with those of our members that are happy sharing their success of Indonesia. So that's the nature of the relationship. Very, very positive, giving a real feel from people on the ground of just what it's like to start the journey, be taken along that journey, and actually begin to reap some of the rewards of investment in Indonesia. Okay, it gives me pleasure now to invite back, if I may, in no particular order, but Martin, if you would like to take a seat up here. Donny, if you would join us as well as chairman of BritCham's, having raced from the airport, and also Ian to come back as well. The opportunity here really is for perhaps me to just prompt a few thoughts to be elaborated maybe, but also to provide you in the 10 or 15 minutes that we have to pose perhaps 2 or 3 questions to each of these people. So I think in the context of Martin, it might be more of the regional perspective and the British ambition in the context of that regional perspective, and how some of the data that you may have seen might slot in terms of relevance. With Donny, it's very much with his Standard Chartered hat on, and also as chairman of BritCham's, very much in conversations with many of our members. It's the domestic environment, but also now Indonesia's bigger play on the international stage as well. And Ian, of course, who has taken a lot of time and trouble together with the BritCham's team. And I would like to thank at this stage a young lady working with me, Irene, who stepped in right in the middle to help coordinate and manage the BritCham's side of this relationship with Nielsen. Okay, so Donny, I know you thought you were just here for a cup of coffee and just popping in to say there's no such thing as a free cup of coffee. You're absolutely right. Donny, we heard from Martin earlier, who preempted a couple of the observations coming out of the data. Ian, of course, has given us great articulation, and Dr. Riagno has given his response on behalf of BKPM. As chairman of BritCham's, Donny, do you have a couple of observations that you might like to share with this wider audience here today?
Thank you, Chris. A very good morning. First of all, let me thank Pak Riagno and Ibu for joining us this morning. And Martin, indeed, actually, to come in here and join us together in this this is one of the things actually that BritCham's does best among all of the other chambers in Indonesia. But gauging that business sentiment about the outlook from real foreign investors in Indonesia who are operating here actually for some of us actually have been here for quite a long time. I suppose actually what I wanted to share with you is that it's great to hear that the results actually have been quite positive overall because there are a lot of increase in terms of the outlook on business in Indonesia, expansion, and really appreciated what you said about you've also acknowledged there are some challenges that BKPM in this instance actually would still continue to work towards overcoming actually those challenges. And I think this is more on the aspiration, I suppose, and to the new government, we would be encouraging an even more sort of closer collaboration, discussions, dialogue in framing the policy framework that would basically improve further the investment climate in Indonesia on a more timely basis. I think a lot of things have been done, we acknowledge that, but in the future we hope actually that will be even more. And BritCham's, we stand ready to be the partner and also the coordinator of the other peer chambers, I believe, in having that dialogue discussions with the government like what we have done during the B20 when Indonesia was leading that in 2022, and also the ASEAN Championship with our AIPF. We have been doing that with one of the most active chambers. And actually, we are probably the most active chambers, foreign chambers in Indonesia. And we stand ready to even foster our partnership together with the Ministry of Investments in Indonesia. The other thing actually I just wanted to say is that there's a lot of perspective about positivity on Indonesia. I just came back from the IMF World Bank SPIC meetings, and when you attend the sessions over there, whether you talk about digital economy, you talk about healthcare, you talk about critical mineral and others, Indonesia, popped up here and there. I mean, it's across the whole entire spectrum. We talk about sustainability, green transition, infrastructure, and so on. And I think actually there's no doubt Indonesia is really at the bright spot actually of that. But there is that element of competition. So I just wanted to highlight, even among the ASEAN countries. So hence, actually, I think it's very important for Indonesia to continue to improve the investment climate. And last but not least, just perhaps actually my reflection, if I may, Martin, I think as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the UK and Indonesia relations, the point is that I think 3.4 billion, we ought to be a whole lot more bigger than that, actually, knowing actually what the UK can offer and Indonesia's actually opportunities between both sides. I mean, that trade relations actually is really gonna be actually double digit, in just the next few years. I think, I'm sorry, I'm not setting actually a KPI or target per se actually, but the way we see it in BritCham's, I think that is something actually that is up for the taking. It's actually a lot of low-hanging fruits. And we hope that we can see that the relationship between Indonesia and UK actually will become officiated by an FDA at some point. I think actually that's one thing that we have been promoting from the BritCham's members actually over the board actually overall. We know that it will take time and there will be process and so on, but we hope that that will come to fruition sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pat Donnie. And I think in terms of the relationship and the engagement with the UK, sometimes there is a preoccupation, and we've had this conversation, Dr. Rianno, just before. There's a preoccupation with the drive for. Do I look like I need it? There's a preoccupation with the drive for investment. Now, of course, when we go on these roadshows, perhaps people like Martin are a little bit conflicted because not necessarily is the priority of DBT to help Indonesia get investment into Indonesia necessarily. In the same way as when I have conversations with Ambassador Desra, he said, "Oh, Chris, I'm not sure whether I should be helping British businesses trade as exporters with Indonesia, because actually what we want are investors." But British expression from little acorns, big oak trees grow. The journey does not start suddenly with a big investment. Very often the journey starts with a collaboration or a bit of trade, develop experience, develop networks, develop relationships, understand how the regulatory environment works, the impacts of the legal uncertainties, the extent to which corruption can have negative consequences or challenges, and develop that sort of deepened experience. That then the next logical step might be, well, what if we actually manufactured in Indonesia? What if we started to use Indonesia as the hub for Southeast Asia and started to take advantage of all this freer flow of trade and labor within the region, and really took advantage of the scale of the opportunity of Indonesia being 40-something% GDP and by size of ASEAN. It's a two double-sided thing, is what I'm saying, Martin. On the one hand, we want to support British export. That's what we do, facilitate trade and investment between the United Kingdom and Indonesia. But a consequence of that, and a very positive consequence, is we help people develop positive experiences where they see real growth and internationalization, globalization of their businesses as a result of those first steps. I don't know if you'd like to just comment on my comment.
Very happy to, and I completely agree with the comments that you've made. Where Britain exports, we also invest. And I think the nature of the UK's relationship with overseas partners has changed rapidly over the last decade. No longer is it the case the UK expects to set up entire UK-owned entities in different countries, and for those to simply repatriate profits back to the UK. The aim of the UK government now is really to support British businesses to set up sustainable partnerships where the financial, jobs, growth benefits are shared by both partners, because we know that's the way to deliver long-term sustainable relationships for the mutual benefit of both sides. And I think we're at a time where the UK's international and domestic agenda also aligns with Indonesia's international and domestic agenda in terms of common and shared purposes in things like decarbonisation, digitalising the economy, and delivering a freer flow of trade. And that's where we can be partners, where we bring the very best of each country together so that the sum is greater, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. In terms of, in decarbonisation, for example, there's some specific areas of British skills and professional services expertise, along with manufacturing, in everything from floating offshore wind through to management of solar systems. In Indonesia, you've got some fantastic manufacturing, and when we combine together, it's possible to not only deliver those products and services in the UK and Indonesia from those partnerships, but as you say, also to export to third countries, and to do that at scale, making best use of both the UK's trading relationships, Indonesia's, and the wider ASEAN connections that we have now as the first dialogue partner to ASEAN for 25 years. And so I think very much the nature of the discussion has moved on markedly, and we're in a period of collaboration and working together with very clear-eyed, open awareness that it needs to deliver jobs and growth on both sides, because that's the way we work today in this modern economy.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give the opportunity to the floor to pick up on perhaps one or two points that represent outcomes of the survey. If you'd like to put your hand up, we've probably got time for 3 questions or so. I'll pick on who should be the person to answer it. Who would like to kick us off? Ian, you did too good a job. Wonderfully articulate, no questions arising whatsoever. But there we go. From the chair of the BritCham's Technology and Digitalisation Hub, Tom West. Microphone on its way to you, Tom.
Sure, thank you. Given that each of you have perspectives that are regionalized across ASEAN, I'm curious to know if we could loosely apply the findings of this to each other member nation, or if there are notable differences that you might expect to come out of a similar index produced region.
Donnie, if I could, you have a regional role as well within Standard Chartered, so what's your sense or feel in terms of whether this replicates across the region?
Tom, thanks for the question. Very interesting. Maybe the answer is yes and no. Yes, in the sense because the sentiment on ASEAN, if you look at the global economic outlook right now, the consensus in the market is that there's a fragmentation sort of and structural divergence between, you just look at the GDP growth outlook for this year. It's across Eurozone, sort of very challenging. US seems to be a bit more rational. China is not quite back up yet to pre-COVID level. India and ASEAN are the two big sort of performance, if you will. ASEAN collectively, but not everybody in ASEAN. Because you've got differences actually in ASEAN sort of markets. The VIP of ASEAN is Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. By the way, that's interesting. The highest GDP growth are the 3 countries for the outlook this year, and those are the 3 countries with over 100 million populations. So we call the VIP. That's the Philippines Minister of Finance actually that coined the term. Actually, I met him last week actually in DC, and he was saying actually these VIPs, interesting. But anyway, but the point is actually not everything actually perhaps actually can be applied, because that sentiment about Indonesia, maybe actually one could say actually the same thing about Vietnam or the Philippines, and maybe less so about some of the other markets. So there's actually a balancing. I think actually this is very distinct, very specific about Indonesia. I remember that Indonesia is the largest economy in ASEAN, despite some of the challenges like the corruption that we talked about and so on that came out in the survey. But there are some strategic sort of values that no other ASEAN countries actually have. Not just in terms of the population, but also the critical mineral, for example, and the sort of, it is actually a huge country. When you talk about tourism, hospitality, and others, actually, I think that will set Indonesia apart. So yes and no in that sense. I hope that makes sense.
Martin, obviously your role takes you around the region. What are you hearing in other countries? Does this mirror, or are there significant differences?
I think the positivity largely mirrors as we come out of COVID. But I think there are some substantial differences as well. When you look across North and East Asia and the population dynamics of decreasing population sizes, enormous constraints in terms of resource availability, compare that to Indonesia, rich in human population, rich in talent that's growing, alongside a wealth of natural resource that's becoming increasingly important as we move towards an electric vehicle world, a net zero world. And so the fundamentals of the geography, the situation, linked to the geopolitics as well, in terms of some of the tensions we see elsewhere in the Indo-Pacific, affect Indonesia less, which provides some of the stability that is so important to investment, and also using somewhere as a hub, and also partnering with potentially political adversaries or military adversaries for economic cooperation in the areas where that makes sense. So I think we see a picture where challenges are different across the region. I think there is an enormous amount going for Indonesia at the moment, and this positive sentiment is reflective of the region coming out of COVID, but I think there's something special here, and I think that's why the focus is so acute.
I think we've all noticed at different downturns, Indonesia has proved to be an incredibly resilient economy vis-a-vis the rest of the region, which, on the one hand, we see various risks that need to be managed, but on the other hand, actually some of those risks are easier to manage in an economy like Indonesia. Thank you very much. Any further questions? Yes, same table. Have we got other questions over here? We have some members of the media as well. You're very welcome to ask a question should you wish. But first of all, Maria.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's really comprehensive and very important findings on the business confidence index. And because my interest is in skilled labor, because there is needs for skilled labor in Indonesia, and I'm looking at the university partners from UK. You have 16 universities. So do you have any strategies, maybe engagement with UK university partners to prepare your human capital in your companies, in preparing them and maybe your business model towards green job and ESG professionals? So I would like to know whether you have any strategies or maybe any needs for preparing your human capital for UK business in Indonesia to prepare for green jobs and ESG professionals. Well, I'm from Indonesia Chamber of Commerce in ESG Task Force. That's why I'm interested in that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Maria. It's a very, very specific question. It sort of moves away from the generality of the Business Confidence Index. Does anyone feel inclined to respond? Ian? and then perhaps I can just add a little footnote to whatever you contribute here.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Maria, for the question. I think it's a very important one. The questions we addressed in the survey and the responses to it indicate lack of skilled labour, access to skilled labour as key factors in driving a lot of the new investment that we're seeing. The interesting thing about the BritCham's Education Centre is that it reflects a group of universities that are offering some of the most modern courses, most vocational courses that are available on the market. So by connecting to those universities and by bringing Indonesia talent to them, and with this exchange of education, we're able to bring back into the Indonesian market trained, well-educated, young Indonesian people who are able to go out, fill those positions in new industry and drive those new business sectors into those areas you mentioned: green, decarbonised, technological, the newer industries that we're seeing. And those are the ones that we're seeing spreading out into the SEZs in Kalimantan, Sulawesi, etc. We link that back to the last question with BISIA, with Britain working in Southeast Asia, with the success of ASEAN, with last year's tremendous ASEAN summit here hosted in Indonesia by President Jokowi. We're seeing enormous interest in growth in ASEAN. ASEAN, we know, is one of the economic powerhouses of the world now in terms of production, manufacturing and growth. And look at the success of countries like Vietnam. We can learn a lot from Vietnam. There's a great deal of envy towards Vietnam, including by some government officials who want to know why Vietnam is doing so well in terms of investment and driving the displaced investments from China, for example, because they have good ease of doing business. It's because they have policies with regard to imports, local content, which are far less onerous and far less rigorous far less restrictive than they are in Indonesia. These are the areas that we should be focusing on as a chamber, as businesses, as representatives, if we wish to make success in those areas. Thailand too. Thailand suffered greatly during the COVID-19 crisis because it's been so predominantly based its economy on tourism. Up to 20% of GDP is based on tourism there, absolutely decimated during COVID. So they haven't been able to achieve even the 5% that Indonesia is seeing. They're still below 4%. But they will be back on the market very soon. The recovery has been very swift in Thailand. So Indonesia is in a competitive environment. So even with Thailand's enormous industrial estates, with semiconductors, high-tech industries, Indonesia stands poised to compete in those markets with the education that universities like this are offering. That's what I would say to that, Chris.
And with what you've just said, certain ministers have been responding to the challenge of competition. And if we look at the education sector in particular, there are very good examples of that. Minister Nadiem has been liberalising a ministry that has been, or a sector that has been de facto closed to international influence on an open basis for as long as I can remember. And in the last 2 or 3 years, Indonesia is now open to collaborations, is open to educational institutions taking investments in different forms. And it's no coincidence that our education centres was started in 2020 to take advantage of this drive. It's also no coincidence that although the numbers on skilled labour are reasonably good and talent is improving, the fact is many of our members are saying that a significant difference, or rather a significant challenge remains the acquisition, development and retention of top talent. And together with some of these universities and many others, we don't pretend to be putting out there an entire solution, but we are definitely making it our business to be a part of the solution to the talent conundrum, particularly also in those very, very relevant segments at the moment. And I and my team would be very happy to have a longer conversation with you and get you more involved in our human capital and education hub as well, Maria.
Can I just ask, Chris, since you mentioned about how Indonesia is responding to this competition, and to your point about local content requirement, a few days ago in DC, actually, at the JETPM, for those of you who don't know, actually, Just Energy Transition Partnership, they have $20 million actually with Indonesia. One of the great progress that you made was the Indonesian government actually just announced that they're going to do the harmonization of the local content requirement. So there's going to be a relaxation of local content requirement, which has been one of the perhaps biggest policy hindrance to many of the, for those of you who are in renewables, for example. I mean, you know that, at the moment, actually, if you want to build, solar power plant, wind, hydro, geo, and others, actually, you got a significant local content requirement, which is probably actually very difficult to achieve. To be quite honest, actually, it's quite realistic. So that's actually quite a great progress. Again, I think it befits the survey results that bureaucracy hurdle actually has become less than previous years, because I think the government is adapting to that, and kudos to the Indonesian government. So there's actually quite a advance on that. The same thing, Maria, just quickly to add the answer. ESG. The universities is one thing, but all of us actually, the members of BritCham's, the British companies over here, we basically uphold very strongly ESG principles. Whether you're in financial sector, whether you're in services, you're in manufacturing. Many of our, you saw the logos actually, I don't need to mention actually one by one, all of our companies actually, for us ESGs are part of the core principles. So in Indonesia, this is what we brainwash, not greenwashing, but we're brainwashing our talents, our people, our staff, actually to ensure that they live by it. And that's exactly actually what happens. So that's our contribution to that. I also spoke last month in London with the young Indonesian professionals in the UK. And funny enough, these young professionals, so they're not students per se. Actually, there's quite a lot of them right now. And that's only the London and Greater London area. It's not the whole sort of entire. And many of them actually work in the ESG space within their industries. They're in manufacturing, they're in financial services, they're in healthcare, and so on. So I was very surprised actually that ESG is front and center in their profession. So again, I think actually that just goes to show actually that's really good. The UK actually is really a very strong proponent, I would imagine, actually on sustainability, green transitions, net zeros, and that goes to show that Indonesian talents who either work in the UK company here in Indonesia, went to UK university, or work actually in UK companies in the UK, actually are sort of dominantly actually in that field.
Thank you very much, Donny. We can take one more question, and then we'll be heading towards a close. Yeah, thank you.
Morning, guys. My question's in regards to the investment into Indonesia by British companies. Are the findings that most of the investment is coming from companies that are already based here and have been based here for some time, or that investment is from new British companies coming to Indonesia to set up different revenue streams, I guess, for them?
Thanks very much. This is Max, who is part of the committee for the Smart Sustainable Cities Hub. I don't believe there is specific data to drive an answer to this, but perhaps there is an opportunity to give an anecdotal response.
So I didn't get any specific data on that for Indonesia, but I can talk about the UK picture. So within the UK, 80% of first-time expansion from other countries into the UK, that's noting that the UK has £2 trillion of foreign asset stock in it and 48,000 foreign companies across the country. 80% of the first landing is in London and the South East, but 80% of the expansions are outside of London and the South East. And that, I think, is a model that, a set of stats that's fairly consistent across countries. So my suspicion, if I was to apply some of the heuristics that are seen across what's called WIPA, the World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, is I suspect 80% of new investment comes into the Jakarta area and then expands out of there. But I haven't seen any specific data. I think it's something we would like to look into. particularly as we, through this year, go on this drive to increase awareness of Indonesia for the UK business population. I mean, my goodness, Brits know about Bali, but they don't necessarily know about the business opportunities in other islands, and that's the problem that we are trying to solve here, because that's it's a hidden secret, and in order for our mutual prosperity, we have to make sure that's realised. I think it's a great question. I think we actually need to look into to tailor the services that we offer to those two cohorts of investors, because I think they're quite different. One of the things we're doing with this roadshow is we're teaming up with our teams in South Asia, because we're conscious the profile of a British business that's succeeding in South Asia is likely to have the same characteristics that can help them to thrive and grow in Indonesia. So to already take that pre-selected talent pool of British businesses that are thriving in India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka and the Maldives, and to make sure that they're aware of the opportunities that are just pop away over here in Indonesia.
I would say that that's a pretty good assessment of what we're experiencing, what we think we're experiencing. As you say, the data isn't there to support it. Perhaps we could look at what we can do to get more accurate data, but you know, there aren't plane loads of new investors coming into Indonesia from the UK, but there are significant, as you saw, significant intentions to increase investment, not just in and around Jakarta, but more specifically around the regions now. Donnie, would you like to make any further comments on that, or in that case, I really need to bring Q&A to a close, because I would like to retain a little bit of time for you all to have the opportunity, if you didn't before this event started, to exchange a few business cards, make some new acquaintances that hopefully you can turn into meaningful and lasting business relationships. But before I do that, Donnie, as chairman of BritCham's, if you'd just like to offer some closing remarks, and then we have a couple of presentations to make to our guests.
No, I think we've had a very great discussion, and really thank you to, again, actually, Martin, Jan, and everybody actually who's been really great actually coming in here. I would like to thank the sponsors as well actually for supporting us so that we can have a great event. And for those of you who are the board members who are here, he had a fantastic presentation, and to Nielsen. I haven't read actually the presentation from Nielsen, but you know, thank you for that collaboration in producing this survey. But last but not least, this is the aspiration, of course, that I believe actually would be coming from all of us, that we're really hoping to see a much, much closer economic relation between the UK and Indonesia in the near future. And let's work towards realizing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Donnie. Don't get too comfortable in your seat. You have a little officiating to do. Has Baba already gone? Oh, okay. Then, if you wouldn't mind representing him, BritCham's would like to offer him a small gift. We have some wonderful clothing that represents our way of celebrating the 75th anniversary of the trading relationship with our most valued stakeholders. So if you wouldn't mind receiving this, no problem at all. For those of you who haven't seen this, there you go, isn't that nice? British flag here, British bulldog on the left, made in Indonesia. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, and Martin, we weren't sure whether you'd wear an Indonesian-focused polo shirt, so as this is your first visit in this role. The team thought they might like to give you a more general souvenir that represents some of the cultural richness of Indonesia. And I think the team would like a photo of, who would you like a photo of? Everybody, like everybody to, if you wouldn't mind coming from this side and from that side into the central area, and it's going to be one of those selfies. And while you're organising yourselves, please come across. While you're organising yourselves, once again, to our market research partner Nielsen ICAEW, to our partners BP Indonesia, British School Jakarta, Bumi Laut Group, CastleAsia, Inke Maris and Associates, ICAEW, London School of Public Relations, LSPR, Noble Solutions, and the Oval Partnership, our sincere thanks for teaming up with us today for this BritCham's International Business Conference Index 2024. Please, come over on this side, come on, don't be shy, come on! Today. Let's have you all over. Yep. Ayo. Wakey.
Yang sama aja.
Yeah, please come over. This is where we want you. This is where we want you in the middle section. That's it. I don't know. The team will tell us.
I think we're still.
Just crush it a little bit, everybody. Okay. Thank you very much for coming and joining us here so early on a Tuesday morning. Friday there is a professional women's hub event. Please, the team will be very, very happy to give you information, or you can go onto the website, or you can take a look at the Instagram feeds. That's on Friday morning. Thanks very much for joining us, everybody. Thank you to my BritCham's team for a wonderfully executed event.
Kapan
Aloha!